It's 11 p.m., the house is quiet, and you're in that familiar hypnotic state of late-night scrolling. Your rational brain, the one that makes responsible decisions during the day, has already clocked out. All that's left is you, your phone, and a tired thumb acting on instinct. You glide past a cousin's vacation photos, an ad for a mattress, a political argument you're too exhausted to engage with. Then a headline pops up, wedged between a video of a dog and a celebrity's post. They laughed when he bought this ruined house. They weren't laughing a year later. A loud, clear voice in your head immediately says, "Don't." You know exactly what this is. It's a 30-page slideshow filled with ads, and the reveal will be underwhelming. You've fallen for this 1,000 times. You hate yourself for it every time. But then a quieter, more ancient voice from deep within your mind whispers, "But what if it's amazing?" It paints a picture, a stunning architectural masterpiece, a story of incredible vision. An irresistible itch of pure, raw curiosity begins to form. The rational voice tries to argue, but it's too late. Your thumb has already betrayed you. It moves with a will of its own. Click. That tiny, involuntary action, that predictable loss against a cheap headline, isn't a sign of weakness. It's the result of a perfectly engineered psychological trap. And the scary part is, it works on us even when we know it's a trap. So what is this invisible force that makes our own brains work against us?
That feeling, yeah, that specific moment you describe where your rational side just gives up against that raw curiosity. That's exactly what we need to unpack today.
It feels so common, almost universal now.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, we aren't just looking at technology itself here. We're doing a deep dive into how companies use behavioral psychology, these deep principles, because, well, their whole business model depends on grabbing and holding on to our attention.
It's not just random then, it's a system.
Oh, absolutely. It's a perfectly tailored system, really refined. And it goes way beyond just, clickbait headlines. It shapes how we use almost all digital products. It affects our mood, our focus, and like we'll get into, it even impacts bigger things like civic life and how we get information.
So it's less about personal failing, like weak willpower.
Exactly. It's not about your willpower.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that the way you interact online, those habits, they've been meticulously engineered.
Okay, engineered behavior. Let's unpack that blueprint. It is kind of shocking when you frame it that way, like we're being trained by our apps.
It has that element, yeah.
So where do we start? The foundation seems to be this dopamine engine you mentioned. It feels like tech created this constant need for more information, but you're saying it's much older.
It absolutely is. Way older. To really get why we scroll like that, why we click, we have to look back at our biology. Mm-hmm. The human dopamine system, it didn't evolve for Twitter feeds, right? It evolved around this really basic cycle of desire and reward related to information foraging. Mm-hmm. Think about our ancestors. Their brains were wired to feel that push, that anticipation that kept them searching for the next meal or water or signs of danger.
So foraging for survival information.
Exactly. And that search, the foraging itself, that's driven by dopamine. It reinforces the behavior of seeking, not just the final reward, like eating the food.
So we have this ancient system optimized for finding berries or spotting predators, and the modern digital world just plugged right into it, hijacked it.
That's a good way to put it. Hijacked is right. That impulse you feel to check your feed again or just skim headlines or, see what's new, that's the same ancient feedback loop. It drives those patterns that evolved for finding physical resources.
Only now the resource is information. Or maybe just novelty.
Information, novelty, social connection, yeah. But the underlying drive, that dopamine hit from the search, it's primal.
And the scale of this hijacking, it's kind of mind-blowing. The statistic you mentioned, the average American checking their phone 344 times a day.
Yeah, it's staggering. Think about that. 344 times.
That's almost constantly.
Pretty much. Like once every few minutes you're awake.
Yeah.
We've become these constant, restless information foragers.
And that restlessness, it points to something deeper, doesn't it? Like dependence.
For sure. I mean, when you see that 74% of Americans feel uneasy leaving their phone at home, that's not just, oh, I might miss a call. That's anxiety, a deep psychological dependence that's been cultivated.
And tech companies know this.
They absolutely know this. To survive in what people call the attention economy, their product has to become your go-to, your first thought, whenever that little itch, that urge or that negative feeling pops up. Which brings us straight to how they actually build these digital habits.
Right, so the goal is automatic behavior, making the app the default solution. How do designers actually manufacture that habit? Is there a model they follow?
There is. It's generally understood through something called the hook model. It's basically a framework. Habit-forming tech guides users through this cycle, 4 specific phases designed to link the user's problem, like feeling bored or anxious, with the company's product often enough that it becomes automatic.
Okay, 4 phases. What are they?
They are trigger, action, variable reward, and investment.
Yeah.
And the whole cycle is designed so that completing one phase naturally sets up the trigger for the next round. It keeps you in this loop until you're doing it without even thinking.
Trigger, action, variable reward, investment. Okay, let's start at the start. Phase 1. The trigger, the spark that gets it all going.
Right, triggers are the actuators. They kick things off. And they come in 2 main flavors. Initially, companies usually rely on external triggers.
Those are the obvious ones.
Yeah, the things you see and hear. Push notifications, buzzing your phone, the little red badge on the app icon showing unread messages, emails hitting your inbox, maybe an ad. These are sometimes called owned triggers. The company puts something in your environment to grab your attention.
But constantly pushing notifications, that must be annoying for users and maybe expensive for the company.
It can be, yeah. And it keeps the company working hard to get your attention each time. So the real goal, the sort of holy grail for designers, is to move past needing those external pokes.
And transition to the other type.
Exactly. The most powerful triggers are the internal triggers. These are different. They get tangled up with your thoughts, your emotions, maybe just a routine you already have. They just appear in your mind automatically.
So the product becomes the thing you just reach for when you feel a certain way. And kind of counterintuitively, it seems like the strongest internal triggers are often the negative ones. Boredom, loneliness. Are designers basically weaponizing bad moods?
That's a provocative way to put it, but there's truth there. In essence, yeah. Feelings like boredom, loneliness, frustration, even slight confusion or indecisiveness. These are really powerful internal states that create this subtle, nagging discomfort, an itch, you could say.
An itch that needs scratching.
Right. And the action, like opening Instagram when you feel lonely or doing a quick Google search when you hit a moment of uncertainty, that action provides almost instant relief. The product aims to be the immediate painkiller for that negative feeling.
This sounds like where that 5 whys method comes in, the one adapted from Toyota, where designers keep asking why to get past the surface reason someone uses a product.
Exactly. It's a technique to drill down and find the real underlying emotional driver, the true internal trigger. You have to separate the functional use, like I use email to send messages, from the core pain point it's actually solving.
Can you walk through that email example again for, say, Julie?
Sure. So, why does Julie use email? To send messages. Okay, why send messages? To share info quickly. Why share info quickly? To know what's going on. Why know what's going on? To know if someone needs her.
And that leads to the final why, the root cause.
She fears being out of the loop. FOMO, basically. Or just general anxiety about missing something important. That anxiety is the powerful internal trigger.
Wow. So suddenly that little red notification badge isn't just an alert.
No, it's actively tapping into her deep-seated anxiety. And clicking it offers a tiny engineered moment of relief. The design shifts from just delivering messages to managing her emotions.
Okay, so the trigger fires, whether it's external or that internal anxiety, that pushes us instantly to phase 2, the action. The user has to actually do the thing, like click or scroll.
Right. And for that action to happen reliably, we look at the FOG behavior model. You mentioned it, B equal M at T. Behavior happens when motivation, ability, and a trigger are all present at the same time.
Trigger cues it, motivation is the why, the drive.
Yeah. FOG breaks motivation down into 3 core pairs. Seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, seeking hope and avoiding fear, and seeking social acceptance while avoiding rejection. Those are the big levers.
We see that motivation piece everywhere in advertising, especially fear.
Oh, yeah. That old motorcycle helmet ad is a brutal example of fear-based motivation, right? The guy saying, I won't wear a helmet, it makes me look stupid. And then the reveal that he has the mental capacity of a toddler because of an accident.
Chilling. Powerful motivation.
Extremely powerful. But here's the crucial thing for designers. Trying to increase someone's motivation is actually really hard. It's expensive. It involves emotions. It's often unstable. People's motivation levels fluctuate wildly.
So that's not where the smart money is, design-wise.
Not usually, no. The biggest bang for your buck, the highest return on investment for designers, comes from increasing the A in BMAT, ability. Make the action ridiculously simple.
Ah, simplicity. Make it so easy you barely have to think about it.
Exactly. Reduce the friction. Reduce the cognitive load required to actually perform the behavior, make it instinctive.
And this isn't just about aesthetics, like a clean design. It's about minimizing mental effort.
Totally. Think about how websites have evolved. Look at Twitter's homepage over time. Back in, say, 2009, it was kind of cluttered, lots of links, different sections. It took effort to figure out what to do.
I remember that.
But by 2012, when they were really growing fast, the homepage was super simple.
Yeah.
Brief description and 2 clear buttons. Sign in or sign up. That's it.
Less thinking required. Higher conversion.
Drastically higher ability to just act when the trigger hit. And you see this pattern historically. Google versus the early search engines is another classic case.
Right, Yahoo in the late 90s was like a portal, a giant directory.
Hundreds of links, news, categories, email.
Wow.
It was information overload. Then Google comes along with basically just a logo and a search box. Clean, simple.
Minimum possible effort to do the one thing you came there for.
Exactly. Google won by radically reducing the time and, crucially, the cognitive effort needed to find information. Simplicity was their main lever for changing user behavior.
We see other examples too, right? Like the iPhone camera being accessible from the lock screen.
Perfect example. Reduces the steps, the friction, to capture a moment instantly. Or using things like Google Sign In or Facebook Login on other sites, one click, no need to type a password. That increases ability.
Designers also use what you called cognitive shortcuts.
Yeah, things like pre-filling forms with information you already provided, or setting defaults carefully. People often just stick with the default because changing it requires effort, even a tiny bit. We're wired to conserve mental energy. All these tricks make it super easy for the user to flow right into the next phase.
Which is phase 3, variable rewards. Okay, this feels like the core of the addiction mechanism, the part where the brain gets that rush. You mentioned a key neuroscience finding here.
Yes, this was a big shift. The old idea was that the brain's reward center, the nucleus accumbens, lit up when you got the reward, like the prize money.
The pleasure of consumption.
Right, but fMRI studies, especially with gambling tasks, showed something different. The biggest spike in brain activity wasn't when the player won the money. It was during the moments before the outcome was revealed. The anticipation of the reward.
So it's not the win itself that hooks us, it's the chase, the need to resolve the uncertainty.
Precisely. It's about alleviating the craving for the reward, scratching that itch of not knowing what's coming next.
And that's where variability comes in. Why is unpredictability so powerful?
Because our brains are efficiency machines. Once we figure out a predictable pattern, like the child learning exactly how the puppy will react, we lose interest. Predictability is boring. Novelty, uncertainty, variability that breaks the pattern. It grabs our attention because the brain thinks, whoa, something unexpected is happening. I need to pay attention to this. Dopamine surges when the reward is uncertain.
So predictable rewards lead to boredom. Variable rewards keep us engaged.
Exactly. And habit-forming products typically use one or more of 3 main types of variable rewards. You've got rewards of the tribe, rewards of the hunt, and rewards of the self.
Okay, let's break those down. Rewards of the tribe, that sounds like social media fuel.
Totally. It taps into our fundamental human need to belong, to feel connected, accepted, important. Think about posting something online.
You wait for the likes, the comments.
Right, and you don't know what you'll get. Will it be a flood of positive reactions? A few critical comments? Crickets. That unpredictability, that variable social validation is incredibly compelling. It keeps us checking back.
Like on Facebook or Instagram.
Or even places like Stack Overflow. Why do expert programmers spend hours answering questions for free? It's not for money. It's for the points, the badges, the reputation within that community. The variable reward is the social status and recognition they get from their peers.
Okay, then rewards of the hunt. This connects back to that foraging instinct you mentioned earlier.
Directly. The hunt used to be for food or physical resources. Now, it's often for information, or sometimes money or deals. The classic offline example is a slot machine, pure variable reinforcement on a random schedule.
Get it online.
Think about scrolling your Twitter feed or TikTok. It's an endless stream. Some posts are boring, some are okay, and then bam, something really interesting, funny, or relevant pops up.
That's the variable reward keeping you scrolling.
Exactly. It's a hunt for the next interesting bit of information. Pinterest does this cleverly too. You scroll, and images are often cut off just enough at the bottom of the screen.
Creating that little itch of curiosity.
Right, a curiosity gap. To satisfy it, to see the whole picture, you just have to keep scrolling. The hunt is baked into the interface.
And the third type, rewards of the self. This sounds more internal.
It is. This is about intrinsic motivation, our desire for mastery, competence, achievement, control, or just finishing something, feeling capable.
Can you give an example?
Remember the old mailbox app? It gamified email. You could swipe to archive or snooze emails to deal with later. It gave people the satisfying feeling of reaching inbox zero, a sense of completion and control that other email apps didn't focus on.
Ah, that feeling of accomplishment.
Exactly. Or look at Codecademy, the Learn to Code platform. It gives you instant feedback, shows progress bars, awards badges. It turns the potentially frustrating task of learning a complex skill into an engaging game. You get these little hits of competence and mastery. That's the reward of the self.
Now, I want to push back slightly here. We're focusing a lot on variable rewards, the unpredictable stuff. But isn't there an argument, especially for useful tools, that continuous rewards or reliability are actually more important for habit formation?
That's a really important point, a key nuance. Yes, while variable rewards are powerful, especially for entertainment or social connection where uncertainty is part of the appeal, technology also lets us create something nature rarely offers: highly reliable, continuous rewards. Think about a service like Google Drive or Dropbox. You want it to work every single time you save a file, right? If it only works sometimes, variably, you ditch it immediately.
Right, that would be incredibly frustrating.
So for utility products, things designed to reliably solve a problem, consistency is the key reward. Predictability and reliability build the habit. In that context, trying to introduce variability can actually be, well, a death blow to the product.
So the hook model, especially the variable reward part, applies best when the product's core value involves some kind of inherent uncertainty.
Often, yes, like social feeds, news, games, dating apps. But we have to acknowledge the power of simple reliability for building habits around tools.
That distinction leads to another important idea: finite versus infinite variability.
Right. Some products have a limited amount of variability built in. Think of a puzzle game with a set number of levels, or maybe early Zynga games like Farmville. Once you've seen all the content, unlocked everything, the mystery is gone. The variability becomes finite, predictable.
And people get bored and leave.
Exactly. They need constant updates, new content injected to keep it fresh. But products with infinite variability, those can sustain interest almost indefinitely.
What makes them infinite?
Usually other people, user-generated content. Think about World of Warcraft, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. The core unpredictability comes from the millions of other users creating new content, having new interactions, changing the environment constantly. It's a perpetually novel system because humans are complex and unpredictable.
So the users themselves provide the endless variability that keeps the platform engaging. That's powerful.
Incredibly powerful. And that constant engagement flows right into the final phase of the hook. Phase 4, investment. We've had the trigger, the easy action, the variable reward rush. What's the investment part?
So this is where the user puts something in, right?
Yeah.
Time, effort, data.
Exactly. Investment is the work the user does that makes the service better for them over time and, crucially, increases the likelihood they'll come back and go through the loop again. It loads the next trigger.
This reminds me of the IKEA effect, the idea that we value things more if we helped build them, even if we did a bad job.
That's a perfect illustration of the psychology. Effort justification. The classic experiment had people build their own, often quite shoddy origami creations.
And they value them way higher than others did.
Almost as high as experts valued professionally made origami. But crucially, impartial observers rated the self-made ones as being worth very little. The labor itself created irrational subjective value for the builder.
So in the digital world, when users spend time customizing a profile, curating playlists, uploading photos, writing reviews, that's investment.
Yes, they're putting effort in, building something, and that labor makes them value the service more. Think about detailed Amazon reviews or complex answers on Quora or a really polished TikTok video. That's user labor, often unpaid, that not only invests them personally, but also creates the content that fuels the platform's variable rewards for other users.
It also ties into the consistency principle, doesn't it? We like to act in ways that are consistent with our past actions.
Absolutely. Once we make a small investment or commitment, we're much more likely to make a larger one later to maintain that consistency, like that study with the signs.
Oh, yeah, the tiny window sign first, then the big ugly lawn sign later.
Right. People who agreed to the small, easy requests first were vastly more likely, 76%, to agree to the big, intrusive request later. That initial investment shifted their self-perception, making the larger request seem consistent with who they now saw themselves as being.
So all these little investments, uploads, follows, customizations, even just learning how to use an interface, they add up.
They add up to what's called stored value. This makes the product intrinsically more valuable to that specific user over time and significantly increases their switching costs.
Meaning it becomes harder and harder to leave, even if a better competitor comes along.
Exactly. What forms does this stored value take? Well, content is huge. All your photos on Instagram, videos on YouTube, years of emails archived in Gmail. Leaving means losing that personal history.
Or your followers and social graph.
Right. The audience you've built on Twitter or LinkedIn, the connections you've made. That's social capital, status, clout. Switching platforms means starting from scratch, abandoning potentially years of cultivation.
And then there's skill.
Yeah, this is big for complex software. If you spent hundreds of hours mastering Adobe Photoshop or a specific coding language or a complex enterprise platform, that skill, that expertise is stored value. It's often non-transferable to a competitor's product, even if that product is objectively better or cheaper. The cost of relearning is too high.
The ultimate example of this lock-in is always the QWERTY keyboard, isn't it?
It's the classic case study. Objectively, it's not the most efficient layout. It was designed way back in the 1870s specifically to slow down typing to prevent mechanical jams on early typewriters.
And yet here we are.
Still using it. Why? Because the switching cost, retraining billions of people who have decades of stored value in their QWERTY typing skills, is astronomical. We're locked in by our collective investment.
Okay, we've mapped the full hook. Trigger, action, variable reward, investment. It's an incredibly powerful loop for engineering behavior. But now we absolutely have to connect this back to the consequences. What are the cognitive costs of living inside these perfectly engineered attention traps?
The costs are significant and becoming clearer. This constant cycling, the craving for the next hit of dopamine from a variable reward, it has real impacts on how our brains function, especially our attention and focus.
These technologies seem built to encourage distraction, right? Multitasking, rapid switching.
They absolutely do. They reward division of attention. Constantly scanning, constantly switching. One study tracked people watching TV while also using their smartphones. They switched their primary attention between the two screens about 4 times per minute.
Wow, 4 times a minute. That can't be good for sustained focus.
It trains the brain away from deep, single-task focus. You're essentially practicing fragmented attention. This disrupts how we allocate our cognitive resources.
And are there actual physical changes happening in the brain? Neurological consequences?
The research, particularly looking at heavy screen time in adolescents whose brains are still developing, is concerning. Correlations are being found with structural changes.
What kind of structural changes?
Things like atrophy or shrinking. In certain gray matter areas, the parts involved in processing information, controlling impulses, decision-making, and also changes in the integrity of white matter tracts, which are like the communication cables connecting different brain regions. The prefrontal cortex seems particularly vulnerable.
The part responsible for executive functions.
Exactly. Impulse control, planning, rational thought. And in studies looking at intensive variable reward-driven activities like gaming addiction, the brain changes observed show functional similarities to those seen in substance addiction, like alterations in dopamine receptor sensitivity or availability.
That parallel to substance addiction is really disturbing, and all this constant stimulation contributes to what some are calling disordered attention.
It seems to be a factor. Studies are finding links between how frequently people check social media and a higher likelihood of exhibiting symptoms similar to ADHD, even if they don't have a clinical diagnosis. The constant barrage of notifications, the hypervariable feeds, the pressure to respond, it creates this demanding, fragmented, cognitive environment.
It feels like our baseline expectation for stimulation has been permanently dialed up.
It's possible. One analysis even suggested that the psychological mechanisms driving social media addiction might actually explain more of the variance in behavioral addiction symptoms than even traditional video gaming did. That highlights the sheer power of combining that social validation loop with infinite variability and constant mobile access.
Okay, so we see the engineering, we see the cognitive toll. This inevitably brings us to the big, thorny question of systemic ethics. When does designing for habit cross the line from persuasion into harmful manipulation?
Look, any technology designed to change behavior is a form of manipulation. The ethical question isn't if it manipulates, but how and to what end. Society seems okay with some form, right?
Like Weight Watchers, you mentioned, it's behavior modification for a perceived good.
Right. It uses triggers, actions, rewards, investments, the whole loop to help people achieve a health goal they presumably want. We generally see that as acceptable, even beneficial manipulation. But then you have things like maybe predatory loot boxes in video games aimed at kids, or extremely deceptive clickbait. Those feel different.
So the line seems to depend on the user's benefit and maybe their awareness.
Largely, yes. And this puts a significant moral responsibility on the designers and companies building these products. A useful tool for them to think about this is the manipulation matrix.
How does that work?
It asks the product creator two simple but profound questions. First, would I use this product myself regularly? And second, do I genuinely believe this product will materially improve users' lives?
Okay, and based on the answers, you fall into one of 4 quadrants.
Exactly. The ideal spot is the facilitator. That's high self-use, high belief in improvement. The creator uses the product, loves it, and truly believes it helps people. Think of maybe the founders of Headspace, meditation, or Duolingo, language learning. They're solving a problem they understand intimately, and they believe it's beneficial. These products often have the best chance of long-term success and positive impact.
What's the opposite end of that spectrum?
That's the dealer. Low self-use, low belief in improvement. This is pure exploitation. The creator wouldn't use the product themselves, and they know it doesn't really help users. It might even harm them. Think casinos, maybe addictive free-to-play games with aggressive monetization, things designed purely for extraction. They rarely have staying power based on genuine user value.
And the other 2 quadrants?
You have the peddler. Low self-use, but high belief in improvement. These are often well-intentioned creators who think they know what's best for users, but they don't actually use the product themselves. Maybe trying to gamify something tedious like filling out insurance forms or a clunky corporate wellness app. They often fail because they lack true empathy and understanding of the user's actual needs and pains. There's a risk of hubris here.
Right. And the last one?
The entertainer. High self-use, low belief in improvement. They create products that are fun, engaging, maybe even addictive, and they use them themselves. Think social media apps like TikTok or Snapchat, maybe certain games. They can be very successful, but the value proposition might be more about killing time or fleeting pleasure than deep improvement. They often struggle with long-term relevance because they're chasing ephemeral desires and novelty.
That matrix is a useful framework. But even if a product is designed to be beneficial, like a facilitator's product, there's still the issue of user autonomy, right? People don't like feeling forced.
Absolutely critical. If users feel their autonomy is threatened, if they feel coerced or tricked, they experience something called reactance. It's a psychological pushback, a rebellion against feeling controlled.
Can you give an example of that?
Quora, the question and answer site, ran into this. They introduced a feature called Views that showed who had looked at your answers. But they initially made it opt-out, meaning it was on by default for everyone. Users felt spied upon, like their browsing history was being exposed without consent.
So they reacted negatively.
Huge backlash. People felt it was coercive. Quora had to quickly backtrack and make the feature opt-in, giving users the choice, restoring that sense of autonomy. The lesson is, even if you think you're helping, users have to feel like they are choosing to engage, not being forced or manipulated into it.
Okay, shifting gears slightly from individual products to the big platforms, the ecosystem itself. How do the economics driving these platforms influence the kind of content we see, especially around moderation and potentially extreme content?
The revenue model is absolutely fundamental here. Content moderation choices are, at their core, strategic market decisions shaped by whether the platform runs on advertising or subscriptions.
How does that advertising versus subscription difference play out?
Well, think about advertising platforms like Facebook or YouTube. Their main goal is scale. They need the largest possible audience to maximize ad impressions and reach. So they're generally more concerned with attracting and retaining a broad base of users, including moderate ones, because there's no price barrier to entry. Their moderation often aims to keep the platform safe enough for big advertisers, avoiding overtly toxic stuff, but perhaps allowing a wider range of borderline content to maximize engagement across a huge user base.
Okay, but what about subscription platforms where users pay a fee?
Their incentives can be different. Because users have to pay, the platform might focus more on catering to a specific niche or providing perceived value that justifies the cost. If such a platform chooses not to moderate heavily, it might attract a more extreme user base willing to pay for that anything-goes environment, as the fee naturally screens out more casual, moderate users.
But what if they do choose to moderate?
Interestingly, research suggests that when subscription platforms do actively moderate, they might actually curate a more consistently moderate environment than ad-supported ones. Why? because they need to signal quality and value to convince people to pay. Aggressive moderation can be part of their premium offering, appealing to users willing to pay for a less toxic space.
That's a bit counterintuitive.
It is, and the whole thing is massively complicated by the imperfection of technology, especially the AI used for content moderation. These AI systems are not perfect. They struggle with nuance, context, sarcasm, coded language. This means a platform's intended moderation strategy might not match the actual outcome. An AI trained to flag certain extremist keywords might accidentally flag a nuanced, moderate political discussion simply because it contains those words.
While more cleverly phrased, extreme content slips through.
Exactly. Or the platform might have to implement overly broad rules that end up removing more moderate content than extreme content, just because the AI can't reliably tell the difference, and they want to minimize risk. So you can't just look at what gets taken down and assume it perfectly reflects the platform's stance on extremism. There are major technical constraints influencing those decisions.
This has been quite the journey. We started with that almost involuntary late-night click, traced it back to our ancient foraging brains, unpacked the incredibly detailed four-phase hook model trigger, action, variable reward, investment used to engineer our habits. We looked at the serious cognitive and neurological toll this constant engagement takes, and finally explored the complex ethics and economics shaping the entire attention ecosystem. It really paints a picture of a meticulously engineered environment.
It really does. And I think the key takeaway is understanding that this isn't accidental. Our oldest, most fundamental psychological drives, seeking information, seeking pleasure, needing to belong, are being systematically identified and leveraged by incredibly sophisticated technologies. These systems are designed to translate those deep drives into predictable, repeatable digital actions. And the scary part is the technology, the understanding of behavioral psychology, it's only getting better, more refined. Society hasn't really developed the antibodies yet, the immune response to these new forms of engineered attention capture.
So the responsibility falls on us, individually and collectively, to understand how it works.
Exactly, to understand how our attention is being captured and held, and why these systems are built to keep us scrolling, clicking, engaging, often against our own better judgment.
And maybe the final thought to leave people with, the truly profound thing here, it isn't just that tech can change our behavior. It's that every single one of those tiny clicks, those moments where our rational brain loses out, those seemingly insignificant unconscious actions, when you add them all up across billions of users, that accumulated history of tiny automated behaviors becomes the fundamental non-transferable value. It's the bedrock asset that sustains some of the world's largest and most powerful companies. That stored value, built from our own small engineered habits, is literally what determines who wins and who loses in the attention economy.